read a little bit from a bit of research I've done the last couple of days. And if anybody's got any questions, they'll be able to ask, or you can chat with me if you want to in the chat. So feel free if you've got any questions. I'm going to talk about blame, healthy blame. And also I've written a note here. We've got recovery from CPTSD, which a lot of people who've had childhood trauma have something called CPTSD. And it's a result of going through a lot of trauma in childhood and not being able to get over it. So, you know, very big problems. And then what we've got is recovery of CPTSD is progressive, and it's knowledge and therapy is the thing that's going to heal it. And also that we need to get to a point where by looking at it, we get to resolve it so that we get to live a good life. So we need resolution on our early childhood trauma, if there is any, and many people have it out there. So let's see here. It's basically CPTSD is a life-spoiling dynamic of CPTSD. So we need to decondition it. So I'm going to start reading, and if anybody comes on, then I'm here to chat. So what I've got is I'm going to read from a little bit from this book, and then I'm going to go on to a slideshow that I have. So this book is called The Tao of Fully Feeling, and it's written by Pete Walker, and he basically is a psychologist who wrote on CPTSD, psychotherapist. His main book that we use when we're healing from CPTSD is Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. And this book is the roadmap out of CPTSD and childhood trauma. So if you look below the links in this video, you'll be able to get you can get it free on Amazon USA. You can get a free copy of an Audible version on USA, Amazon, and you can get it free on Kindle UK. So what I'm going to do, though, is read an earlier book of his, which I've got here, called The Tao of Fully Feeling. And I'm going to read a section, and it's chapter 7, and I'm just reading a small part of it. And it's about blame and forgiveness, which is really important for people to comprehend and understand. So he says here that blame and forgiveness, and he says blame is not a dirty word. He says we are all born with a healthy sense of blame. Blame is an instinctual, angry response to unfairness. Actually, let me just get my glasses. Hang on a sec. I'm back. Okay. I do need these actually because the print is a bit small on this one. So let me start again. So I think the more people talk about CPTSD and understand what it is, because a lot of people have reactions to it and they don't understand what's going on. So let me read this to you. So he says, blame and forgiveness, and blame is not a dirty word, and it's from the Tao of Fully Feeling on CPTSD. So there's a little bit here that really hit me when I read it earlier yesterday. It says, we were compelled to gratify our parents' unconscious needs at the cost of our own self-realization. We need to experience the rebellion and mourning aroused by the fact that our parents were not available to fulfill our primary needs. So when I'm reading this doesn't, cover, all parents. There is something called good enough parenting, which means that when we've had good enough parenting, when we're not damaged, that there may be things that annoy us about our parents or stuff like that, we're all normal, healthy relationships. We've all got things we may not like, but overall, heavy abuse, be it verbal abuse, sexual abuse, or physical abuse, I think I've said, and what happens is that it can affect the entirety of our adulthood, and we need to comprehend how we're going to resolve it rather than just living in pain all the time. So this bit might be helpful to those out there that, have been told that you can't blame and you've just got to forgive. So the chapter is blame and forgiveness. Blame is not a dirty word. He says here, we are all born with a healthy sense of blame. Blame is an instinctual, angry response to unfairness. It is an innate impulse of self-protection. Blame is the reflex to call to account those who have hurt us and to refuse to take responsibility for wrongs and ills that are not our fault. Blame, like sexual feelings, can be expressed in healthy or unhealthy ways. The safe, non-abrasive venting of blame is essential to recovery. Healthy blaming allows us to release our stored up resentment about our childhood ordeals, freeing us from conscious or unconscious embitterment. Many survivors find blame to be the most difficult emotion to accept and view it as the ultimate sin of anger. And again, this is consensus beliefs. You know, we're told, you know, through religion and consensus reality that, you know, you can be upset if a stranger is, you know, has done something rude to you. You can blame them, but you can't blame your parents no matter what they've done. And this is very unhealthy for people that have had heavy duty trauma. So we've got widespread, he says, widespread social taboos prohibit children from blaming their parents, even through dysfunctional parents typically blame their children relentlessly. Dysfunctional parents hypocritically crush their children's instincts to blame unfairness in toxically blaming ways. Many survivors were blasted with some version of most survivors were blasted with some version of the following when they tried to call a parent or real perpetrator to account. Do as I say and not as I do. Don't blame us. If you weren't such a rotten kid, we wouldn't have hit you all the time. How dare you talk back to me, you insolent little brat. I'll wash your mouth out with soap. Don't try to get out of it by blaming your brother. You're the troublemaker. You always start it. Don't blame them. If you're in trouble, you must have brought it on yourself. Going on, it says, the instinct of blame is difficult to recover because these messages go off inside us the instant we begin to feel blame. This makes us feel so afraid, ashamed, or guilty that we immediately repress our blame. Or we turn it inward and blame ourselves for feeling blame. We need to renounce these messages about our healthy blame, or our denial about our childhood losses will remain intact and we will be left holding the blame for all our parents' transgressions. We can enhance our recovery immeasurably by giving blame back to those who dumped it on us when we were too young and defenseless to refuse it. So you can imagine, like children that go through abuse, we've got a situation that if we don't understand, you know, through the consensus and religious beliefs that go around that, you know, we're not allowed to blame, we're just going to end up not being able to heal. So there is something called healthy blame, and we've got to take on board that it's safe for us to feel and to express healthy blame and to talk about this in therapy and such like as well. What I'm going to do now is read a bit on grieving. I'm a bit all over the place tonight. So where am I? So I'm going to read a bit on grieving, and then what I'm going to do is also show you a little slideshow that of a few things that I saved, pictures that I made that say some really good stuff that are very healing things to know. So I see I've got one person watching at the moment, so I thank whoever that is. And I basically, for anybody watching this, you're going to be able to, or not watching it, they're going to watch the playback. But all right, so grieving is really, really important in healing. And when I started Pete Walker's book, it was about November 2017, I found his book. I was watching YouTubes and listening to people in groups and saw this book. This book came up. A girlfriend of mine said, please get the book. And the book was this book here. And I've well read, all the pages are falling out of this one. I'm just about to order a new one and get it bound. But this book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, is the roadmap out of CPTSD, and it walks you through what you need to do and explains. And the good thing about that was in the book, he actually did say it does take about 2 years to really begin to recover. And through therapy that I've been having also since last September, once a week, which is trauma psychoanalysis, I've begun to, you know, flourish and I got really angry and I began to grieve, and I went through all of these different emotions. And when I went through my anger stage, I never thought it was going to end. It was just, I was so angry. And the book thankfully brought up, you know, the memories that needed to be, that were so repressed, that needed to, you know, be I needed to get them out of me, because I was turning things over in my head, and I felt extreme guilt that I couldn't forgive, and all of these emotions that were hurting me. So bit by bit, as we get the knowledge and we read and we watch YouTubes, and if we're in groups on Facebook, I've got a ladies group that any ladies can join. I haven't got one for the guys, but I can refer any gentlemen watching, I can refer you to a few groups on Facebook that I know about that are really helpful for PTSD or CPTSD. So now what I'm going to do is, from the Complex PTSD book, I'm going to read a bit of chapter 11. I'm not going to read it all at once, because there's a few pages here, but after I've read a little bit here, I'm going to do a little bit of a slideshow. So what have we got? Chapter 11 on grieving. Grieving is an irreplaceable tool for resolving the overwhelming feelings that arise during emotional flashbacks. Moreover, grieving is the key process for working through the host of losses that come from growing up in a CPTSD-inducing family. So what is a CPT? I'm just coming back to what a CPTSD-inducing family is. A CPTSD-inducing family is where there's been lots of different types of abuse, and where it's been ongoing, and there's been nobody nurturing you or loving you as a child. And if you can think, any child that's not loved or nurtured is, and abused. However, abuse is, for a child, it's all the same, whether it's sexual, physical, verbal, or spiritual abuse. Any abuse towards a child is going to be very damaging, and it's going to give a child something called arrested development, which means that we don't flourish properly, and we don't grow into, being, a free human being to, say what we need to say. It can cause so many different problems. So going on reading, he says, as we grieve the losses of childhood, because these losses are like the deaths of important parts of ourselves. Effective grieving brings these parts back to life. In this chapter, we describe the healing that is available through the 4 practices of grieving, angering, crying, and verbal ventilating and feeling. So when I started, I think when I became conscious that I had to heal. So there's a difference when you're going through the pain of abuse, whatever the abuse is, again, sexual, physical, verbal, or spiritual abuse. When you're going through that abuse as a child, there may be many years later that you go into your 20s or your 30s. We're all at different levels of understanding. For me, it didn't really hit me until, I was sort of, in 2012, it really hit me bad how much I'd been abused, because I was self-medicating with alcohol. So when I stopped drinking alcohol, all of my emotions and feelings came up, and deep anxiety and memories and nightmares and all sorts of things. So when we understand at some point, I think it took me a couple of years to understand that I had something called CPTSD, which is not a disorder. It's a response to events in your life, the same as PTSD is. Like an army veteran will go, off to war and see something, tragic and awful. Not just, PTSD just doesn't come from that. It can come from many different, traumatic events. But as an example, it's when people are out of the situation and they look back on hindsight that they've got all of these problems that have occurred through seeing trauma or experiencing trauma. So CPTSD, the difference between PTSD and CPTSD, the complex PTSD, is ongoing, and it's an event that goes on generally for years and years, whereas PTSD is generally a one-off event. I'm not saying it's one-off. I'm not going to negate, the seriousness of it, but it's just to give you an understanding of the difference. Going on reading here, he says, if you find that, that's what I was going to say. So grieving, angering, crying, verbal ventilating, and feeling. So when I began to really grieve, then I got really angry. And then I went through a long period of time of tears as well, and verbal ventilating. And we need to have the right people that we can verbally ventilate to, because what we don't want is people who are going to shut us down by telling us that we've got to forgive, or that, we just need to get on with it and we need to be grateful. because there's a very deep wound in many people that have been through early trauma that needs to be healed. And the only way it's going to be healed fully is by looking at it fully and fully feeling what those feelings really meant and felt like. So it can be sadness, it can be anger, it can be so many different things. Going on. If you find that crying or angering is inaccessible, because it is for some people, yeah? So if you find that crying or angering is inaccessible and it does not help or makes you feel worse, then your recovery work may need to focus on more of on deconstructing your inner critic. He says, grieving expands insight and understanding. So a little poem, it says, I saw grief drinking a cup of sorrow and called out, it tastes sweet, doesn't it? Have you caught me? Grief answered, and you've ruined my business. How can I sorrow when you know its blessing? And that was Rumi said that, the poet Rumi. Insight, as crucially important as it is never enough to attain the deeper levels of recovering. No amount of intention or epiphany can bypass a survivor's need to learn to lovingly care for himself or herself when he is in an emotional flashback. It is crucial that we respond to ourselves with kindness when we are feeling scared, sad, mad, or bad. Grieving aids the survivor immeasurably to work through the death-like experience of being lost and trapped in an emotional flashback. Grieving metabolizes our most painful abandonment feelings, especially those that give rise to suicidal ideation, and at their worst, active suicidality, duality, I think he says, so what I was going to say there, so, you know, it can, when he mentions that, it's like, you can feel like you don't want to be here. It's like that feelings of like, you know, I've probably said it myself. I wish I wasn't here. I wish I wasn't born. You know, I don't want to live. It's like, what's the point? So that's what he means by suicidal ideation. It doesn't mean that you know, don't want to be here really. It just means that you have thoughts of, you know, not wanting to be here. He goes on to say, recoveries who need to grieve the death of their early attachment needs, meaning needs that were not met, we must grieve the awful fact that safety and belonging was scarce or non-existent in our own families. We need to mourn the myriad of heartbreaks of our frustrated attempts to win approval and affection from our parents. Because a lot of abused children, what they'll do is that they'll think it's, you know, it's probably not conscious, but they'll try and please their parents. Now, even if their parents are abusive to them, children will try and, you know, fawn. And fawn means where you become, you know, you think that you've done something wrong as a child when you're beaten or whatever's going on. So then you become over nice, and we can carry that into adulthood. Like fawning is where somebody's rude to you and you're just being polite to them, or you're freezing. And so he does talk about the 4 Fs, which are fight, flight, freeze, fawn in this book. And again, below this video, you can access the 13 steps for managing flashbacks and the 14 steps for the inner critics. So below this video, you're going to find those things too. Going on, he says, grieving also supports recovery from the many painful death-like losses caused by trauma, by childhood traumatization. Key childhood losses addressed through this book are all crucial developmental arrests that we suffered. The most essential of these are the deaths of our self-compassion and our self-esteem, as well as our abilities to protect ourselves and fully express ourselves. He says, grieving the absence of parental care. Sorry, I'm losing myself a bit there. Grieving the absence of parental care. He says, as our capacity to grieve evolves, we typically uncover a great deal of unresolved grief about the deadening absence of the nurturance we needed to develop and thrive. Here are the key types of parental nurturing that all children need in order to flourish. Knowing about these unmet needs can help you grieve out the unreleased pain that comes from having grown up without this type of support. Moreover, this knowledge can guide you to reparent and interact with yourself in a more nurturing way. So again, this is in the book. This is chapter 11 of the complex PTSD from surviving to thriving. So I'm just going to read through these steps, which are, let me see, 217. Okay, so there are 4 steps here that he says that we need in order to, you know, to be more loving to ourselves. So number 1 is verbal nurturance, eager participation in multi-dimensional conversation, generous amounts of praise and positive feedback, willingness to entertain all questions, teaching, reading, stories, providing resources for ongoing verbal development. These are the unmet needs that maybe we had. So this is what we've got to establish now as adults and reparent ourselves. Number 2, spiritual nurturance, seeing and reflecting back to the child his or her essential worth, basic goodness, and loving nature, engendering experiences of joy and fun and love to maintain the child's innate sense that life is a gift, spiritual or philosophical guidance to help the child integrate painful aspects of life, nurturing the child's creative self-expression and frequent exposure to nature. Number 3, emotional nurturance, meeting the child consistently with caring regard and interest, welcoming and valuing the child's full emotional expression, modeling non-abusive expression of the emotions, teaching safe ways to release anger that do not hurt the child or others, generous amounts of love, warmth, tenderness, and compassion, honoring tears as a way of releasing hurt, and being a safe refuge, and humor as well. Number 4, physical nurturance, affection and protection, healthy diet and sleep schedule, teaching habits of grooming, discipline, and responsibility, helping the child develop hobbies, outside interests, and own sense of personal style, and helping the child balance rest, play, and work. So you can see, I mean, I definitely, you know, I'm missing hugely on that list. And for many of us, we are, you know, and what I'm going to do is now I'm going to find my slideshow. I'm going to see if I can share here, but I need to check on my mobile phone that this will be, that that my slideshow will come up. So bear with me for 1 minute. I'm just going to, on my mobile phone, see my YouTube page. Because when I go on my slides, I can't see if I'm live or not. So let me see. I'm live there. It's turned down. So what I'm going to do is now share my screen with you, okay? And show you a few slides. So turn to meeting. Okay. Let me see, back to meeting. And what I'm going to do is share my screen. And let's see, I should be able to see that on my phone come up. So what we're going to do here is that it's really important that we have compassion for self. So you might be able to see now my screen. Let's see. So if anybody talks, I can't see right now. Yeah, right. So you've got it. So let's see. So number 1 is that's really important for us is that we have compassion for ourselves. So let's see that this slideshow is working. It's a bit slow this end. So this is a meme that I make. I like making these. So I made this the other day and it's very simple, but the idea of having compassion for ourselves is that we need to really sink into that. I don't know if you can see this actually. Let me see. No. I wanted to make it bigger. So what I'm going to do is come out of this and let's see. I think I'm sharing my screen for sure. Back to meeting. Okay. Stop share. There you go. Right. Okay. That should be it. So what I've got here is that I've got this, you know, which I made, which basically says compassion for self. So we really need to be able to sink into that and get to a place where we are really having self-compassion. And for many of us, it's really difficult to get to, there you go. I've just seen it come up on my phone. So it's really difficult for a lot of us to really get to a place of deep self-compassion, but you've got to imagine that you've got this little child inside you, which we have, you know, that never goes away. I mean, I'm 50 plus now, and I can tell you that I still have this inner child inside of me that needs that nurturance and love. So I've been reparenting myself, and I've been getting rid of my inner critic. And I give my, you know, I basically, if my inner critic comes in and tells me there's something wrong with me, or I'm getting it wrong, or I'm not good enough, I knock it out of the way. It's really important that we do the inner critic work. So below the video, you're going to see the 14 tips for dealing with your inner critic, and then the 13 steps for managing flashbacks. And this work has to be done. So that compassion for self, you've got to really sink into it. So maybe you can do that, you know, when you've got a moment to yourself, or when you're going off to sleep at night, you know, just be with yourself for 5 or 10 minutes and just be aware of that inner child and have deep compassion for whatever you're going through. If you're having a bad day, or, you know, you feel like you're not good enough, just really get to the point where you're understanding that you've got to have compassion for yourself. And as you do that, what will happen is that when we have compassion for ourselves, that expands outwards, and we begin to have compassion in the world for others as well. So the next one, getting to a place of homeostasis, however we say it. And this is the tendency towards a relatively stable equilibrium between interdependent elements, especially as maintained by the physiological process. So what is happening there is it's getting to a place where we are, where basically inside of us, we're feeling at peace. But I will say that from reading Pete Walker's book, he did say in the book, from reading that book, it does take about 2 years. And I can honestly say I started that book in November 2017, and we're just coming up, you know, a few months before November 2019. And having done the work and having had therapy for the last year, I'm really seeing now how this book has really shifted me. And what I did was I got it on Audible, the Audible version. And I also had the book, which I, you know, read as well. And it was very scary to pick that book up. Like, I didn't want to pick it up at the beginning because I was afraid to do the work, because to do the work is not easy. You know, we need people that we can talk to whilst we're doing the work. You know, it's very difficult to just do it on our own. So the next slide is that knowledge is power. So you know, it's the truth of that is that knowledge is power. For me, I can honestly say this: if I was just having therapy, or I was just going to go off and take anxiety pills, which I didn't do, and I had very bad anxiety at the beginning, you know, when I stopped drinking alcohol. If I just took anxiety tablets, or I just had therapy or CBT or something like that, it wouldn't have been enough. I had to self-educate. I had to get the knowledge. And realizing that this is one of the reasons I make these YouTubes, because I know that the knowledge is needed out there. And even if a few people see this, it's going to help. So knowledge is power, and the right knowledge for what we're trying to heal as well, you know, and also understanding what consensus reality beliefs are and how damaging they can be when people who've not been through abuse are telling people that have been that all they've got to do is forgive, and they should, because it's parental abuse. And this is not the case. You know, each of us is a soul. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm a soul on this planet, and nobody owns anybody. Even if, you know, people are parents and they have children, there's no ownership. Each of us is a soul in a body, and we're on our own unique journey. So we don't, you know, this is not about owing people anything. There's a lot of beliefs that, you know, don't hold water and are not truth, in my opinion. So the next one, this is a little poem I wrote a few weeks ago that I'm sharing with you. And it says, "The love I seek is in my heart. I see it clear and not apart. I see my soul right through my eyes, and all the times I've been alive. Cycles come and cycles go, and in form I move and in form I flow. And when I'm not, I'm still the same, a full collection, all untamed. Nothing to prove, no words to speak, no paths to cross, no bones to tweak. And each life as precious lot, come to learn what we are not. So through healing, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning what we are not. We're going to decondition the parts of ourselves that really hurt, that have really been traumatized, and get to a place where we have self-love. And, you know, it's one of those things that people throw around, self-love, but the main thing what we need to do is get rid of the inner critic, and that's going to lead to self-love. We don't want a voice in our heads telling us that we're defective and that we're wrong, because those voices generally will have come from our carers as children. And for some people, it's not going to be parents. It's, you know, I say parents, but it can be carers as when we were children. And next slide is, this was something I made, I've got it on my page. So on my Facebook page, this is from Pete Walker's book, From Surviving to Thriving. But what you're going to be able to do is, you know, if you go over to my Facebook page, you'll be able to save a copy of this and maybe carry it on your mobile phone. And this is how you're going to reparent yourself. This is the reparenting affirmations that he has in his book. So if you were talking to your inner child, I mean, if I was talking to an inner child, if I was talking to a child, you know, this is the type of person I am. This is what I would say to a child if they were hurt or they needed nurturing. Every child needs nurturing, but if they were upset about something, you know, this is the opposite to abuse. But this is what we can say to ourselves. So if I was going to say it to you, or you can get a friend to read it to you, or, you know, many ways we can implant this stuff in our head, but generally it's going to be that we need to do this for ourselves. So reparenting affirmations are: I am so glad that you were born. You are a good person, and I love who you are, and I am doing my best to always be on your side. You can come to me whenever you're feeling hurt or bad. You do not have to be perfect to get my love and protection. All of your feelings are okay with me, and I'm always glad to see you. It's okay for you to be angry, and I won't let you hurt yourself or others when you are. You can make mistakes, that they are your teachers. You can know what you need and ask for help. You can have your own preferences and tastes, and you are a delight to my eyes. You can choose your own values, and you can pick your own friends, and you don't have to like everyone. You can sometimes feel confused and ambivalent and not know all of the answers. I am very proud of you. So that's what you're doing with your inner child. You're talking to your inner child like a parent, and you're reestablishing and who you really are, and your worth and your value, because we all are. And some of us have had it completely knocked out of us. I know, you know, and people who've not been through abuse have got low self-esteem as well. So, you know, it's not just people who've been through abuse, but abuse just makes it much harder to go to self-love. So that's it today. I'm going to stop share, and I'm back. And really, that's it for today. I hope it's been useful to somebody out there. Let me see if I can go. Right, so I'm back on, and I, you know, just look at the links below. Let's see. I've got a few messages there. I'm going to read. Twin Aquarius says it's helping me a lot. That's really nice to hear. I'm really pleased, because I want to help people. It's really important that I do. It's part of my own healing as well. And One Love says, beautifully inspiring poetry and guidance you provide. Yes, I like writing poetry. It's been part of my healing, and it helped me to speak from my heart. And Timmy Thames says, once again, big thank you. All right, so that's it. So I'm going to go. It's what time is it? It's 11:15 p.m. in London. I'll be back over the weekend, and if anybody's got any questions, come over to my Facebook page, or for the ladies, you can join my ladies group. So that's it. Okay, I'll be back over the weekend with something. Catch you all later. Thank you for watching.